Hello again. So far I've talked about the 10 best horror films of the past decade, the most underrated movies, the best sequels, and the greatest movies to watch on Halloween. And this time I'm going to be talking about 10 of the strangest movies I've ever seen. I don't necessarily like all these films, but these are the ones that left me feeling the most perplexed and weirded out, and the ones that just would not leave my brain, no matter how much I wanted some of them to. And these are not going to be in any order at all, so thank you very much for watching this video. See ya. While American audiences were absorbing David Lynch's feature film debut Eraserhead in 1977, another equally unconventional film by a new director was screening in Japan, and also changing the rules of what the art of cinema could accomplish. But unlike the midnight stoner art house crowds at Eraserhead screenings, Hausu's adoring audiences consisted mainly of children. Published reviews were unusually sparse for this candy-colored, trippy horror fantasy, because this is the kind of film that leaves even the most veteran of moviegoers flabbergasted. It is a whirlwind of hallucinations, an incomprehensible magical journey that uses every cinematic trick in the book, like superimpositions, freeze frames, stop-motion animation, color tints, and chroma key compositing to achieve the effect of what looks like an 88-minute dream sequence, the most incredible dream you've ever had. This psychedelic haunted house fantasy was made with innovation and energy front and center, not realism. It's about a teenage girl named Gorgeous who brings 6 of her friends to her aunt's house for a summer vacation, but unbeknownst to her, her aunt's deceased and the house has an insatiable appetite for youthful girls. This house contains a futon monster, a piano that devours people, a mirror that allows your reflection to attack you, and a cat named Blanche that shoots laser beams. Whether you are straight edge or would like nothing more than to drop acid and frolic into a hybrid of Scooby-Doo and Alice in Wonderland, House is something that everybody needs to experience. One of the darkest days of my childhood was when I found out that my favorite show at the time, Get a Life, had just been cancelled due to low ratings. It was simply too weird of a show for the early 90s, or probably any time. But a couple years later, my agony turned to ecstasy when I found out that Chris Elliott was starring in a new movie called Cabin Boy, and he was bringing Get a Life co-stars Brian Doyle Murray and his dad, Bob Elliott, with him. It's about a prissy, fancy-lad doofus who mistakes the luxurious Queen Catherine cruise ship for an old rusty fisherman boat, and it takes him quite a while to realize he's on the wrong vessel. The crusty drunken fishermen don't take too kindly to young Nathaniel's pompous arrogance, but after an odyssey that includes a half-man, half-shark, a giant, an iceberg monster, and a big fat-ass floating cupcake that spits tobacco, they develop mutual respect for one another. You'll also see a hilarious cameo from David Letterman and a very young Andy Richter. Cabin Boy proved to be every bit as polarizing as Get a Life, earning low box office returns and lots of negative reviews. But I've always loved this movie, and I hope that it will someday receive a special edition DVD or Blu-ray with tons of extras. Get a Life was finally released on DVD last year from the fine folks at Shout Factory, so be sure to check it out. This one is about an unsuccessful and unfunny stand-up comedian who for some odd reason grows a third arm out of his back one day, and then his career finally takes off. People still aren't laughing at his jokes, but his sleazy agent isn't concerned, because how many other three-armed comedians are out there? The dark backward is revolting, offensive, ugly, but also unforgettable, and that's a shame because I wish I could erase a lot of it from my memory. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where everything is covered in layers of slime, filth, and probably toxic waste, and that would explain why nobody behaves like a rational human being. The cast astonishingly features many well-known names like Bill Paxton, Judd Nelson, Laura Flynn Boyle, James Caan, Rob Lowe, and Wayne Newton. What is he doing in this movie? Even though I don't care to ever watch a single frame of this movie again, I have to admire its uncompromising nature and creative visuals. If you're a fan of John Waters, you would probably really dig this movie. I think the best movie I've seen in the past couple years is With Noel and I from 1987, and I was delighted to learn that Bruce Robinson's follow-up film was something I saw and loved many years prior. This also stars the magnificent British actor Richard E. Grant, who plays an intelligent advertising executive who is struggling to come up with the slogan for Pimple Cream. Only adding to his stress is a boil on his neck that seems to be getting bigger every day. When the boil grows eyes and a mouth and starts talking to him, he goes absolutely bonkers and believes that the boil is trying to overtake him, which puts his marriage and his career in serious jeopardy. Getting increasingly perplexing with each scene, it's unclear whether it wants to be satirical, a farce, or a psychological breakdown of alter egos. but Richard E. Grant makes such a compelling and amusing lunatic that I didn't mind the movie's schizo nature. Withnell and I ended with one of the most heartbreaking and beautiful monologues ever, and How to Get Ahead in Advertising also ends with a monologue, but this time it is incoherent, baffling, and it goes on and on and on, yet somehow it works perfectly in the context of this utterly mad film. When the fourth entry of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series sat on the shelves for years, I foolishly assumed it was because it was so disturbing and violent that the studio was hesitant to release it, but after I finally got to see it, I totally understood their trepidation. It starts off like your typical slasher movie with appallingly idiotic characters having car trouble and then wandering around where they don't belong. But soon after the cannibalistic Sawyer clan takes center stage, the movie veers off in mystifying detours and it becomes an incoherent mess of a film. You can take all the scenes, scramble them in a blender, and then show them in any order, and it wouldn't make any difference. The previous entry starred a not-yet celebrity Viggo Mortensen, and here we get early performances from Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger. And they were both angry when this embarrassing film finally hit theaters once they were big Hollywood names. Leatherface is in drag for basically the whole duration, and doesn't kill a single person, and that's not even the strangest thing about this movie. I keep revisiting it every 5 years or so because it's such a crazy, fun ride, and I keep hoping that I'll be able to find some smattering of logic in the final 10 minutes. I could seriously talk about my love for Troll 2 for days and days, so I'll try not to get carried away here. The Room, Manos the Hands of Fate, and Plan 9 from Outer Space have all achieved legendary status in the Heckle Cinema Hall of Fame, but there can be only one best worst movie ever, and that is Troll 2. Due to its utter incompetence and transcendent awfulness, Troll 2 has earned both a legion of fans and a prestigious place on the IMDb's bottom 100 list. Just to clarify, there is not a single troll in the whole film, and it has nothing to do with the original film Troll. The crew members were all Italians who spoke very little English, and the cast were all Americans with little to no acting experience. Making matters worse was director Claudio Fragaso's stern insistence that the lines be read exactly how they appeared in the script, no matter how clumsy they sounded. The cast members knew that the script was ridiculous and nonsensical, but they were just so thrilled to be working on their first motion picture, so they did what they were told. But nothing could have prepared them for just how embarrassing and unintentionally hilarious Troll 2 ended up being, or how the small-budgeted horror cheapo shot in Morgan, Utah would become a cult hit so many years later. It's hard to fathom just how something like Troll 2 can exist in the world, so the 2009 award-winning documentary Best Worst Movie is also a must-see. It was directed by Michael Paul Stevenson, who plays a little boy in Troll 2, and it catches up with just about everybody involved and reunites them in festival screenings, and the result is one of the funniest and most moving documentaries in recent years. I saw it in a film festival in Denver, and George Hardy and Michael Paul Stevenson were both in attendance, and they were both really nice and genuine, and it was great to meet them. And lastly, I just want to express how wonderful it feels to be friends with Credence Leonard Gielgud on Facebook. Deborah Reed, you are awesome. I have not seen The Peanut Butter Solution since I was in either second or third grade, but any movie that can provoke this kind of reaction has to be considered unusual. Since I had already seen so many horror movies, it was surprising to me that this PG-rated kids movie would horrify me to the point where I never wanted to see it again. A couple years ago, out of curiosity, I looked it up on the IMDb, and the message boards were dominated by people claiming that this movie traumatized them as children. It felt like a support group in a way, and it was oddly comforting to realize I was not alone in feeling this way. It makes me wonder just what in the hell the writer and the director intended for this movie, and if they had any idea just how disturbing it would be for children. From what I recall, it starts with a little boy who enters a supposedly haunted house in his neighborhood and then becomes so frightened that he loses all of his hair. Then someone in his family learns of a hair growth remedy involving peanut butter, but it ends up working way too well because soon this boy starts to resemble Cousin It. And adding to the mean-spirited nature of the movie are school bullies and a strict teacher who for some reason poisons children with yogurt. I don't remember if I rented this movie, if a friend let me borrow it, or if it was simply on TV, but I wish I had never been acquainted with the peanut butter solution. I guess I should just be happy that it did not ruin my appreciation for peanut butter, and I know that because the only two Girl Scout cookies I buy every year are Do-Si-Dos and Tagalongs. And how could I possibly forget Terry Gilliam? Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Time Bandits, The Fisher King, and 12 Monkeys would all be suitable inclusions in this video, but to me, the one that stands out the most is his first post-Monty Python film, with the amusing early title of 1984 and a half, paying tribute to both Orwell's 1984 and Fellini's masterpiece 8 and a half. In Brazil, our extremely likable and sympathetic hero Sam Lowry works in a bureaucratic futuristic society that looks like Metropolis but has more convoluted technology, tedious paperwork, and a perpetual Big Brother presence. It is smoky, there are tubes everywhere, and everybody seems either cold or insane, so it's no wonder why he's only happy when he's asleep and dreaming of being a knight and saving the girl of his dreams. His waking life finally becomes interesting when he investigates an administrative error that resulted in an innocent man being arrested, and more so when he actually finds the mysterious woman from his dreams. Brazil is half whimsical fantasy and half dystopian nightmare, so most likely it will leave you really disoriented and confused if you're watching for the first time, but it will undoubtedly nestle around in your brain for years and years until you can't resist the temptations to go back to Brazil and be weirded out all over again. Where does one go after making Phantasm 3 and 4 and spending so much time with brainsuckers, reanimated trolls, and the sinister tall man? Naturally, director Don Coscarelli chose to cast Bruce Campbell as Elvis Presley, who lives in a nursing home in Texas and battles an Egyptian ancient mummy with the help of his friend played by the late great Ossie Davis. And this character truly believes he is JFK, despite being African American, because the government dyed him this color. I'm thankful that this movie has a decent-sized fan base and that its cult appeal seems to be growing every year, because usually movies this weird either can't get made or go direct-to-video with little attention. One of Bubba Ho-Tep's biggest admirers is one of my favorite actors, Paul Giamatti, and in an interview he was asked what director he would want to work with someday, and he said Don Coscarelli. And this resulted in the two of them meeting, and then Giamatti was cast in Coscarelli's new movie, John Dies in the End, which I plan on seeing sometime in the next week or so. While making The Shining, Stanley Kubrick reportedly made his cast members watch Eraserhead just to get into the appropriate mood for filming. And that makes perfect sense because it's impossible to watch this movie and not feel off-kilter and a little berserk by the end. I'd be foolish to even attempt a brief synopsis because the whole plot is open to interpretation. When I first saw it, I had no idea what the fuck was going on, but it didn't bother me that much because I was so enamored with the aesthetics and the atmosphere, and I liked how the whole experience felt like I was exploring someone else's dream by creeping around in the corners of a disturbed but brilliant mind. This is a strange world, and I would despise living in the land of Eraserhead, but it sure makes for an interesting 85-minute departure. My favorite scene has to be when Henry has dinner with his perpetually depressed girlfriend and her oddball parents. There's just something so haunting and unforgettable about that part. David Lynch spent over 5 years making Eraserhead, and he would reunite with two of its stars many years later for Twin Peaks, Charlotte Stewart and the late Jack Nance, who got to speak the first line of dialogue in the pilot. And I could have just as easily chosen Lost Highway, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, Blue Velvet, Dune, Wild at Heart, Mulholland Drive for this video, so maybe in the future I'll do another one and just focus on the films of David Lynch.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.